There are stories where something violent happens, and then there are stories where nothing happens. And that's what makes them unbearable. No scream, no struggle, no clear moment where everything goes wrong. Just a sequence of choices that slowly lose their shape until survival itself becomes unreachable. This story isn't about monsters in the woods. It's about what happens when the human mind quietly stops trusting itself. It's the story of 5 men who walked away from safety and never came back. The car is not buried. That's the first thing everyone notices. It sits crooked on the side of a mountain road, half turned, as if the driver changed his mind at the last second. Snow dusts the hood and roof, but not enough to trap it, not enough to stop it from moving. One window is down, the keys are gone, the gas tank is still nearly full, the road ahead is worse, the road behind is better. And yet, this is where the car was left. 5 men were inside it only hours earlier, grown men, adults, capable of laughing, arguing, choosing, capable of turning around. They didn't. They stepped out into the cold night instead, into rising snow, into darkness that swallowed sound. No one forced them. No accident pinned them here. No visible threat chased them into the trees. And from the moment they walked away from that car, every decision they made moved them farther from safety, even when safety was still painfully close. Searchers will later say the same thing again and again, their voices tight with disbelief. They didn't need to die out there. But that sentence assumes something this story refuses to give us. Logic. Before the mountains, before the snow, before the wrong road, there was routine. Tuesday nights were basketball nights. For the families, it was comforting. A schedule they could rely on. For the men, it was structure, predictability. A world that made sense because it repeated itself the same way every week. They played on a team in Chico, California. They cheered too loudly. They took the game seriously, then laughed about it afterward. They had inside jokes, favorite snacks, preferred seats in the car. They were known in their community, recognized, protected. This matters, because later, people would reduce them to labels, clinical words, easy explanations. But that night, they were simply 5 friends driving home after a game they'd already played dozens of times before. Nothing about the evening signaled danger. They stopped at a convenience store, bought snacks, soda, candy, food meant to be eaten later, somewhere warm, a small but telling detail. They were planning for later. At least, they were then. Somewhere after midnight, the road changes. Not dramatically, not with warning signs or sudden cliffs, just a gradual shift. Pavement thinning, trees closing in, darkness pressing closer to the headlights. No one knows who noticed first. No one knows who spoke. What we do know is that the car does not turn around when it should. Instead, it keeps going, higher, colder. The silence inside the car thickens. Tires crunch differently beneath them now. Snow appears in streaks along the road, thin at first, then heavier. This is where people expect logic to step in. This is where someone says something feels wrong. This is where the car turns back. But this story isn't about normal moments. Something more dangerous happens instead. Momentum takes over. No one asserts control. No one clearly objects. No one says stop. And when the car finally does stop, when it can't go any farther, it's already too late to feel confident about any direction at all. Snow piles around the tires, but not enough to trap them. The engine isn't dead. The heater still works. They are uncomfortable, but not stranded. That detail will never stop mattering, because what happens next will never make sense in the way people want it to. They open the doors. Cold pours in. The night air doesn't rush. It presses, quiet and heavy. Snow absorbs sound, turning the forest into something unreal. A place where voices feel too loud and footsteps feel wrong. One by one, they step out. Not running, not panicked, not chased, walking. This is where the story fractures. Because once they leave the car, every rule they live by dissolves. The road back is downhill, easier, known. The road ahead climbs into darkness, and yet their footprints lead away from the car. Searchers will later follow those prints and feel the same confusion crawling up their spines. Why uphill? Why into deeper snow? Why keep going? There is no evidence of a fight, no sign of outside interference, no indication they were forced. Only 5 sets of footprints pressed deliberately into fresh snow, moving together. At first, walking in snow changes the body. It steals heat faster than you realize. It dulls urgency. It makes distance feel shorter, until it suddenly isn't. No one knows what was said between them as they walked. No one knows who began to struggle first. What we do know is that the group does not stay whole. The footprints begin to separate. Some drag, some stagger, some disappear altogether. At some point, fear replaces clarity. But fear doesn't always scream. Sometimes it whispers, just a little farther. Sometimes it convinces you that stopping is worse than moving. Sometimes it makes you follow, even when you don't understand why. And once that switch flips, once the mind abandons reason, every decision afterward feels necessary, even when it isn't. Miles away, unseen and unknown to them, sits a trailer. Inside is food, heat, blankets, shelter from the storm, a place meant to keep men alive. But survival isn't just about resources. It's about decisions. And by the time the trailer enters this story, something inside these men has already broken. Morning arrives quietly. Snow softens the edges of everything it touches, smoothing sharpness into something deceptively calm. The mountains look peaceful from a distance, untouched, indifferent, almost beautiful. But the car is still there. When it's found, there's an immediate sense that something is wrong. Not because of damage, but because of absence. No bodies, no blood, no signs of violence, just a car that should not have been abandoned. The driver's door is unlocked. The keys are missing. The windows are down just enough to let the cold inside. The fuel gauge still hovers near full. This is not a vehicle that failed them. This is a vehicle they chose to leave. And that decision becomes the first splinter in the searchers' minds, the one they can't pull out. At first, the response is measured. Lost hikers, disoriented travelers, a wrong turn that went too far. Search teams fan out. Helicopters lift into the air, blades scattering snow into spirals that vanish almost instantly. They expect to find them nearby, cold, hungry, but alive. Because people don't usually walk away from a working car in winter. And when they do, they don't usually walk uphill. That detail keeps surfacing, whispered between searchers like a bad omen. Uphill. The first real clue arrives not with answers, but with discomfort. Footprints. 5 distinct sets pressed into the snow, moving away from the car and into the trees. At first, they're close together, purposeful. Then the spacing widens. Some prints sink deeper, some drag, some veer off course, then correct again. This isn't panic, it's something worse. Movement without certainty. Days pass, more snow falls. Footprints vanish beneath fresh layers. Cold settles deeper into the mountains. and searchers realized something unsettling. If the men didn't turn back early, they likely never could. Cold doesn't just weaken the body, it erodes judgment. Hypothermia doesn't announce itself loudly, it persuades. It makes bad ideas feel reasonable. And once the mind starts slipping, it doesn't correct itself. It doubles down. When the first body is found, it isn't where anyone expected. Not near the car, not near a clear path. Just a man who ran out of warmth. No violence, no explanation that satisfies, only more questions. They realized then that these men covered far more ground than anyone thought possible. They didn't wander, they traveled, and something kept them moving. The trailer is found almost by accident, weathered, hidden, easy to miss. Inside is shelter, inside is heat, inside is food. At first it feels like relief, until they step inside. Nothing is ransacked, nothing is broken. The heater has been used. Someone was here, someone survived the night. And yet most of the food remains untouched, enough to keep a man alive for weeks, left where it was. One of them made it here alive, lived long enough to start a fire, arrange bedding, endured days, maybe weeks, and still, he starved, not because food was gone, but because something prevented him from using it. What kind of mind sits beside food and does not eat? Fear doesn't always push people to act. Sometimes it teaches them to wait, to obey invisible rules, to fear doing the wrong thing more than doing nothing at all. The man inside the trailer never fully claimed the space. It's as if authority lingered even in absence. Obedience without a leader. Weeks passed. Each day survival felt both easier and harder, until action itself felt impossible. The others never made it there. They died alone, scattered. Some vanished completely. Years later, people still talk about this case in lowered voices. Not because of what happened, but because of how quietly it happened. No screams, no struggle, no single moment where everything went wrong, just movement and waiting, and the unsettling truth that survival was possible until it wasn't. None of the men made a decision that felt unreasonable in the moment they made it. Each step forward felt safer than stopping. Each delay felt wiser than acting. Each silence felt easier than questioning. And by the time something felt wrong, if it ever did, their minds no longer trusted themselves enough to fix it. Picture the trailer one last time. The heater cold, the cans still sealed, the silence settled into the walls, a place that could have saved them. A monument to hesitation. This wasn't a story about 5 men lost in the mountains. It was a story about what happens when certainty disappears, when fear replaces leadership, when momentum replaces choice, when waiting feels safer than acting. Some mysteries haunt us because we don't know what happened. This one haunts us because we recognize ourselves in it, and that is far more terrifying.
Madness and Macabre.